Mr. Simpson, would you please stand and face the jury?
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in Count 1 of the information.
The gates of Camino.
If you want to be a winner, you got to have the tools. Sports and business is all the same. You got to know your opponent, and you got to know yourself. You got to train properly, you got to get your rest, and you better know what you're putting in your body.
New Power Burst. Not just a thirst quencher, but an advanced performance sports drink.
Why not be a winner?
Power up with Power Burst.
Nobody does it better than Hurt.
Nobody does it better. Hertz leads the others by far. Nobody does it best of all. You Hertz, the superstar.
Nobody has more of what it takes to rid you of Fairmont, Mustang, LTD, or other fine car faster.
Hertz, the superstar.
You know it.
We are good with those cats now.
Fish. Oh my God. Can we just turn the bottles up and give a little bit out, pour a little out to the I've got
some gin and juice, baby.
I've got some juice right now. I've opened up the orange juice, the OJ Simpson.
Oh man.
Has left this mortal coil.
An iconic figure, to say the least. You know, we talked about doing an O.J. Simpson actor episode months ago. We've talked about doing it. And now that he's dead, we were just like, hey, let's just do one. Let's
just do one. And I'll be honest with you. I don't, I have limited O.J. Simpson filmography. I've got his IMDb up to help myself and to help us. But as far as like, I don't know what I don't know a lot of his stuff, but I know enough.
The thing is about OJ, you got to be really like our age or older to really appreciate him. Like anyone younger, I mean, he's been 30 years. He's been this notorious figure of from everything he did.
30 years exactly. I mean, for those of you that are listening to this, I don't know when this is coming out. I mean, if we time this to come out on June 12th, so in a couple of months, so it's the anniversary of the murders. Maybe. Yeah, maybe this comes out. Maybe you guys are listening and it's June 12th of 2024, exactly 30 years after the murders, or maybe it's sooner. But either way, right now we are filming this, we're recording this, and it's April 12th. So it's April 12th, 2 days ago, O.J. Simpson passed away. We've decided to do this, and I just got to say, the symmetry of we are 30 years, almost to the day that he killed those two people, those two motherfuckers.
Yeah, it's wild, man. Because he was so much. I mean, this guy's a Heisman Trophy winner. He was like a superstar running back too. I mean, he wasn't people don't know how to really like.
What is your earliest memory yourself, like as Vito, what is your earliest memory?
He was a broadcast announcer on NBC Sports. Right. So I always knew he was this icon running back. He rushed for over 2,000 yards in a season. He's literally.
So you knew that, like
I knew of him, and that's right when Naked Gun started coming out.
Because your dad was a big, he was Pittsburgh and a Steeler fan. Of course, the Bills are in the AFC too. So
you just know him from watching football and seeing him as a broadcaster, really. And he was very charismatic, and he was O.J. Simpson, Yeah. So and I knew him, and he was also an actor. But then when Naked Gun came out, he became like. Within our generation, he really became known. And yeah,
I feel like my earliest memories are definitely the Hertz commercials because he made those famous like in the
Mhm.
70s and early 80s. But yet he would still return to do one every so often throughout the 80s.
yeah.
And that's where I kind of first, like as a little kid, like that's where I took notice of like, oh, he's this funny, smiling dude that's running around. And I remember as a kid getting him confused because I was just so young.
Mhm.
I got him confused with Jim Brown from The Dirty Dozen because my dad loved The Dirty Dozen, and
Okay.
as a kid, I would just see it, like I would randomly it'd be on TV a lot, and so I would get him mixed up because they're running in both of those, like
Well,
in the
that's
movie, Jim Brown is running at the end.
but talk about star power. That's almost the same thing in a way what people need to understand. Like how Jim Brown is, picture Jim Brown with a little more charisma. That's OJ Simpson, I mean,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
yeah, people loved him. He was all over
yeah,
the place,
like Jim
and
Brown was like the too serious as fuck OJ. Jim
yeah,
Brown was just too damn serious.
he was serious. Yeah.
OJ was could be serious, but man, he was funny. And
Everyone
and
loved the
and
juice.
again, you saw those commercials, the Hertz. I think that after that, then after that, my first intro certainly was Naked Gun. My dad
Man.
loved the Naked Gun. And
I
I
love it,
mean,
man.
I went with him to see it in the theater,
Hmm.
and he laughed his ass off. And I was 7 years old, and I went and saw that. And
Oh shit.
that's like a rated R movie. But my dad, and of course, even for a 7-year-old, that's funny stuff. But it's
Yeah.
different when you get older. Like the humor when you're a kid is just, oh, this is some goofy, this is funny. They're like, they're running around and like, they're clotheslining people. And
And
there's
he's
fun music.
awesome in it. Like he really does have
He
chemistry with the
is
other guys.
so funny. I had to watch those again. I watched his scenes from all those Naked Gun movies today, and I'm telling you, his scene. He's got two big ones in the first one, two
Hmm.
big scenes. But of course, the biggie is him getting shot on the boat and his slapstick
That opening
comedy.
scene, man.
That's like Buster Keaton. That's like
Yeah.
Buster Keaton-esque, like just the way he's like, oh, and he hits his head, and then he leans on the fucking the painted door. He's like, oh no. And then and he's all over then his face goes in the cake, and then he falls. As a kid, I thought that was funny because of the humor of the physical humor.
Yeah.
Now I watch it, it's still just as funny because of him, his reactions. He's so light. You know what I mean?
Right. No, he's so good in that. That opening of Naked Gun, yeah, is probably one of his best, like
That's
ever in his acting career. That's just that's
well,
what he's
look,
remembered for.
that movie is the movie. If you ever ask anybody who kind of knows movies,
Mhm.
like have a decent understanding, everybody say the same thing. It's Naked Gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and he's got the bed scene where he's like, he's
Oh yeah.
he's all,
Heroin.
heroin, and then Naked Gun 2.5. He's got some funny scenes in that. He's playing it up a little bit more,
Right.
because
Right.
but the first one is just primo. And I was looking over his IMDb just because I was like, if you go back, kind of like going back.
Yeah, man. Start with the 70s. He was still an active football player when he was doing pretty big movies,
Right.
like mid 70s. Towering Inferno was like a blockbuster.
Huge movie. I mean, that was like
Yeah.
the biggest movie of that year. One of the big, and yeah, he's in that, and of course, we were talking earlier, The Klansman, which we've also seen, and
Lee Marvin.
and he's-
Yeah, that's a great
and
movie.
he's playing. He's not a good. I mean,
I think he's not that bad of an actor.
yeah, he's not a
he's
bad actor.
charismatic enough to get you.
Yeah, he
considering what
definitely
athletes
is. And in The Klansman, his character is like, it's a gray character. I mean, he's not bad and he's not good because he's kind of an asshole in it. You know, his
Right,
character is
right.
kind of an asshole, but
Yeah.
which was obviously a huge kind of thing to do when you're, like you said, when you're a major star
Right.
and everybody loves you.
Now he was in Roots. I didn't know that.
I saw that.
actually.
He's got, it's a, so this is what it is. Cause I was like, where's his scenes? It's a cameo. And
Okay.
I found it and it's just a super quick, it's him and Kunta Kinte. And I don't really know the context because I've never seen that,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I've seen pieces of it,
That's
but
like years ago.
but they're in Africa and Kunta Kinte is running and of course, so the moment is just OJ running, right?
Oh,
Like
really?
yeah, it's him running and
Oh,
catching up to
man.
Kunta Kinte, but he's got this like long robe on and he's like an African nobleman or something. So he's, shirtless and of course he's ripped and everything. But it's not bad. It's like it's a super quick, it's a literal cameo. It's like one
I
moment.
see. I
But it's
see.
they got him running because they're like, if you got OJ, you got to have him running.
Right.
Like that's
Right.
just how it is.
I'm one of those people who, I mean, I really like Capricorn 1 as well.
I was about to say Capricorn one, and
Yeah.
he won like awards for that, but it was like for best or worst actor. It was like,
Nuh-uh.
yeah, he won a Razzie for that.
No.
Yeah, for worst.
No way.
He won a word not. Oh no, I take that back. In '95, he won Worst Supporting Actor for Naked Gun 33 and a Third. But
Oh,
in
okay.
'78, there was a thing called the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, and he was nominated for Worst Supporting Actor for Capricorn One.
No. Have
So
you ever
he
seen Firepower?
no, I haven't.
That's pretty good. I mean, anything in the 70s with James Coburn is,
Yeah.
to me, it's all automatically good. And it's pretty decent.
I mean, looking over this thing, I was like, there's some movies that I mean, Killer Forces on YouTube. I started playing that, but I thought, okay,
Oh, I've
actually,
never seen that.
it's on YouTube, and I was like, I think I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna do it later. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then and I saw this other thing from '79 that it's a TV movie called Goldie and the Boxer, and I don't know,
Okay.
it just because I know it's going to be sweet, scrumptious, like just that sugary sweet type of TV movie from like the '70s, because
Yeah.
it's called Goldie and the Boxer, and he plays this guy named Joe Gallagher, who's like I mean, the tagline is Joe Gallagher is an unknown boxer who gets spurred by his friendship with the 10-year-old daughter of a deceased
What?
boxing champ to go for the title. So it's one of these movies where it's like, he's an
Christ.
unknown. He's gonna, the girl, it's a little blonde girl, 10-year-old, and she's, it's like the French, those, that's just pure '70s gold.
Oh,
And even
yeah.
though it's probably bad, they had a sequel to it called Goldie and the Boxer Go to Hollywood. So this has got to be something that was at
That's a double
least
feature I'll do with you anytime.
that is
Anytime.
like, and it's got Vincent Gardenia in it.
Oh, that's cool.
It's I mean, it's got a lot of people in it. I mean, but I mean, I just saw it and I was like, you know what? This is something you just want to sit down and drink and just enjoy the
Yeah, Goldie
cheesiness
and the
of it.
Boxer double feature.
It's cheesy as fuck. It's '70s TV movie, but man, I want to see it. But
Right up our alley.
but he was at that time period. He was totally just looking over this. He was totally like everybody loved him. He was never going to play the bad guy. He was always going to play, just
Yeah.
the lovable goof or whatever.
I mean, he was steadily getting, not more and more famous, but like in a sense, like he definitely was venturing in, because of Naked Gun and everything. He
Naked
could have
Gun.
done something pretty big or whatever in
Well,
acting.
he did it. Now there was a TV show that ran for 5 seasons. So I mean, 67 episodes. That's not bad, for the '80s, for the golden age of TV.
Which
And
one?
we're talking. It's called First and 10.
Oh, I remember.
remember that?
Show? He was on that?
Yeah, he did 67 episodes.
I didn't even remember he was
So-
on First and 10.
Yeah, so
I just remember Delta Burke.
yeah, okay, there you go. Shannon Tweed was on it for 30 episodes, for God's sakes. But yeah,
Oh,
Delta
no
Burke,
way.
Tiny Lister for 25 episodes.
I remember
obviously before
Tiny
he-
Lister. I barely remember OJ.
Uh,
Oh, that's so funny.
Donald Gibb, who
Oh,
is
yeah,
is you know
course.
we know
Ogre.
nerds.
Yeah.
So I mean, it had like some people, but 67 5 seasons.
Oh, that was a good
mean,
show,
that's-
man. Yeah.
And OJ was right up there. I mean, he was one of the main dudes. I don't know. I've never seen the show, so I don't know
Somebody-
what he was playing. But.
I think I think it might have been Joe who said it, but somebody was like, it was a good example to tell people nowadays. It's all well, maybe not now because The Rock has gotten so big, but like it's almost like The Rock, like being as famous as he was and then killing his wife.
That's not a bad. You know what? That's
Because I mean,
actually not
OJ
bad.
was loved and famous, and like he wasn't a wrestler, but he was a football like
right
icon.
and
God,
no matter
yeah.
what, I mean, like wrestling's has never outdone NFL. So I mean, that's actually
Right.
a really good comparison. If The Rock, because the only difference would be that I guess the only difference would be is The Rock is, probably had a few more
Now
big
he's
movies.
just like the
Yeah.
most famous man in the world, kind
Yeah,
of.
now
thing,
he's more,
where
but if you had him like say 5 years ago or 7 years ago, yeah. And Rock just said, "I'm killing my family," and he just killed his family, and he drove, through America, and they caught him, and he got, yeah, that would be the I could see
Yeah,
that. That was
I
actually not
mean,
bad.
it's crazy as 30 years ago because there's a lot of people we know that did not live through that. And like I mean, do you remember it was in the
Well, so-
summertime? Like, do you remember where you were?
Oh,
when it happened?
I absolutely do. I mean, and of course, the past couple days, I've been seeing listen. I was addicted to this to the OJ trial.
yeah.
Like that was my. I watched that just to go to sleep sometimes, just because it's sort of like monotonous and like I know what I've seen it so many times, but it's just comforting for some reason.
Sure.
And, and then so now everything's just being brought up again. But when that happened, I remember being at because I was 13. I had just turned 13. So
Okay.
I mean, like I was like prime, and I was actually that was back in the days when I actually watched the NBA and I
Mhm.
cared about what's going on. And I remember like being
Yep,
a Nick. I
yep.
was a Nick fan. Like I not hardcore, but I liked the Knicks. I was like because they were New York and I always liked the Yankees and blah blah blah. So the fact that they were in the finals. And then, the Rangers were in the Stanley Cup Finals. They had won, and there was just all this like sports stuff. And that was when I was kind of like, really getting into, because NBA Jam, like NBA basketball
yeah.
games were big. So I was really digging that stuff. But I want to say that I know where I was. I was at a cousin's house. It was like, it was like a summertime. We were over there swimming. The family went over there on a Sunday or not Sunday, but something like that. It was like we're going to go over there because all the kids were out for summer and everything. And I remember it cutting to the like it was just on the TVs around the house, and you're not really paying it too much attention because just games are on or whatever. And then all of a sudden this stuff happens, and then they're doing the double screen, like and that's when he was like running, right? That was when he was like in the white Bronco.
Yeah.
And he was, so I mean, I guess technically that's what I remember is the white Bronco is the first bit of it, because right before that, they weren't really saying he was the killer. It was just like, oh wow,
Well, there was this
thought.
small buildup. There was a small.
Small-
like
right.
you, I was like a junkie for this. It was just
Yeah.
and I was like pro OJ. I was like, beat the case.
No, I was the same way.
I'm
I
a
was
young
like,
kid, man. Yeah,
but
yeah,
I couldn't believe it. I could
I
not.
couldn't either. But there was a small buildup.
Not
So
that
first
dude.
thing that happened was his wife got murdered, but OJ was not a suspect. And I remember because at this time, we
Right.
used to just like party a lot at my house, like me and my friends
Yeah.
at the time. So I remember we were like hearing about it, and then they were like, OJ, all of a sudden it became OJ is being questioned about it. And I remember that night we were all like, oh my God, this is crazy, thinking like, kind
But
of
still not
joking about it.
really. Yeah, you're
Not processing yet.
Yeah.
The very next day I'm pretty sure it went like that. Then the next day was, and we were like, I don't remember what we were on, but we were really like fucked up at my house one night. It was like a group of us. We were down in my basement. Like, I don't even know if we were like tripping or something. We were doing something.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden somebody comes running downstairs and they were like, OJ's on TV and he's going to kill himself. And we were like, oh my God, we all go running upstairs. And we sat next to the TV and
that's when you see
all fucking night.
Just glued.
Yeah.
And that you bring up, you actually bring up a good point. When it first happened, because I remember that footage of like him with his golf clubs and he had just gotten back from Chicago and he's just kind of brushing through, he's pissed or not pissed, but he's upset and he's brushing. And not once did I even think, like, it's sort of like this. You see on the news, O.J. Simpson's wife found dead with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the only thing going through my mind is like, oh, that sucks for O.J. Or not even that. Really, just like not even thinking he had anything to do with it. It was just like, oh, probably. Like when Michael Jordan's dad was killed. On the side of the road. It's just one of those freak accidents.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, then they were like questioning him.
Remember they handcuffed him at his house, and then they took him off, and they
took him off.
Yeah,
and that's where I thought, like, oh yeah, they just obviously they know he didn't do it because he couldn't have. Not this guy, not the guy from Naked Gun, not the guy that brought me such joy. My dad, such joy, like so much laughter.
Right.
Not that
Norberg, man. He was Norberg after that.
You couldn't possibly. Like that was when I realized that was honestly probably the moment of my life where I finally realized, oh, just because you could be this thing on screen, like you could be this wonderfully funny, warm individual, you could be a psycho, a literal you could absolutely be a murderous psychopath.
Yeah,
it was kind of mind blowing, and then of course, like you said, the chase. The high speech, everybody watched that.
It was, my buddy Shelby, shout out Shelby, the guy I wrote Play Bible Camp with, and he was living out here and happened, and he was on the freeway when OJ was driving by.
That's so awesome. That is so awesome. Like that's the crazy thing. I remember watching all that and glued to the TV and thinking about like California, just thinking like, man, I wish, like
me too. I was just like, I wish I was out there.
Yeah, because you see the freeways and you're not really sure, now, like, you're like, you see them on the 5 and I heard this earlier and I was giggling because somebody was saying like, how the fuck was there no traffic? Like you see at that time of day.
Well, remember they were clearing the roads for them,
right?
They had cops miles ahead too, and it was just
clearing them up and everything.
Yeah, it was so huge. It was so huge. And I remember when I first moved out here, which was like more than a few years later, but like quite a few years after the trial. OJ was in AC, Al Collins. They were both at a convention that we went to. We went upstairs to like go see him and everything. And people were like fucking protesting it, wearing shirts that said fuck OJ on there. And I'm like, oh man.
Well, I mean, listen, when they read out, and I mean, we were all there. I mean, when they read out not guilty, I mean, that was kind of like when the towers were falling, like everybody was watching it. I was watching it. And I just remember, again, I think that we were back over, we were at family's house somewhere, like, my dad's side of the family somewhere, but we had to have it on and everybody was watching. And I remember when they said not guilty, like there was still that part of me that didn't want to believe it. And I was like, whew, like it must be true. It must be. There was a part of me that really thought like it must be 100%, true.
100%.
That is because I was only, even then, that was 95. I was only 14.
Right. You were, I was still a teenager. I was like 18 or something like that, 18, 19.
I heard this earlier too. This actually was kind of interesting. When all this went down, So in June of 94, I had just gotten out of, I mean, literally just gotten out of what would that have been? The seventh grade.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I'm still a seventh grader, right? Well, it didn't, when the trial wrapped up, it was October of 95. I had
Yeah.
just started ninth grade. So it was like in a sense, like two grades of
God
my
damn.
life. Because seventh, eighth, and ninth, they're all very different. So by the time he's getting found not guilty, I'm like a freshman in high school. It's just when you think of it like that, it does
That's
because
amazing. Yeah.
in all honesty, it's only 1 year, right? It's a year and some months, but in terms of like school years, in terms of people's
It's a
lives, like
a big portion.
it really stretched. And I think that's another reason why it's still for people like us, like you were saying earlier, our generation, why it is still like a big part of our life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You
I
know,
love that old footage of when they announced not guilty, and
oh my
they
God.
show all those like white women like crying and
They
stuff.
were
Like I
they
was
were
like, oh,
so and there's the and
all the
there's some
white
of
people are like,
yeah,
no,
it's
no.
like there's whites and black in the same, they're in the city, they're like on the corner or something, and they say
Right.
not guilty. Every single black person's like, yeah. And
Yeah.
every single white person's stone cold silent.
Right.
Like
But
just like, what
what do
the
you think
fuck?
about this? Because, and it happened just now when he died, I feel like white people, like, usually, if you give them free range to, like, crucify a black person, they go
Yeah.
for it. I don't care how liberal they act like they are. If it's like,
Yeah.
I could, because look at, like, I mean, not that there's a little comparison, but look at Robert Blake. Like when he died,
Oh
no one
yeah.
was like, good riddance, good riddance. I
Well,
mean, OJ even went to jail for 16 years. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
that's more
even
of a jail sentence than if he would have gotten guilty for murder. He would have done like
right.
6 years.
And then he'd been fried or something. But yeah, it's like, but I mean, no, I know what you mean. It's like, I mean, here's the thing. I always found this fascinating, and especially now when he died, there's a forgiveness and I know that's a weird word to say, and there's gonna be a lot of people hearing this, all six of them that are hearing this that are gonna be like, no, man, you're wrong. No. If you go and you look, the majority of, especially the pundits and I mean, look, even the lawyers that are still alive and the people that were attached, they're still alive attached to the
Yeah.
trial, there's sort of this forgiveness, like if you go and watch Marsha Clark over the past 10 years, like when they did
Right.
the OJ show, with John
Yeah.
Travolta and all that, when they were interviewing all the people that were still alive for that. So they were and so Marsha Clark, obviously, she was getting interviewed a lot, and she was like on Oprah, and she was on this and that. Somebody even asked her, "Do you hate OJ?" She was like, "I don't hate OJ. I mean, and the way she talks about him is like, all is forgiven. You know what I mean? Like there's a smile on her face. And I'm not saying anything about her as
Yeah.
much as I think time passes, people move on with their lives, things become a little more important in your own life. And then you kind of have a place, well, it wasn't me who he killed or my family. So, and he's still kind of funny. He's still silly. I mean, he stayed with that smile. He never lost that smile.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too. David Lynch said he got the idea for Lost Highway because of O.J. Simpson. He said
Wow.
that he was thinking about what a guy goes through, what kind of mindset you go through when you get away with murder, like how like what kind of person you are after you kill somebody, and it's pretty interesting. But I mean, I don't know. I thought it was just we can debate all
Well,
day
I
about like
I
how
saw
we should talk about OJ now, but I
well, no, I
mean,
mean it's
you
like,
know,
look, it's the good thing with this podcast is like we are primarily here for the films and for and we can separate the
hmm
two. Like, how do you separate Michael Jackson, the musician from,
yeah,
the other stuff, you know what I mean? Like, because
yeah,
I mean, who knows? I don't know what I believe about that, but I know that a lot of people believe things. You just separate it. He was funny in films. He was, a huge star. He could do drama. he could do. He wasn't the greatest actor, but he was way better than a lot of others.
Yeah, he was
And
definitely better than a lot of them.
to think about true Hollywood, I mean, that is the pinnacle of true Hollywood, like underbelly, or not underbelly, but like you brought up Robert, what's his name? I mean, you brought up you just said him, the guy who
Robert Blake.
yeah, that's another one of those stories. Phil Spector.
Yeah, Phil Spector, right.
Like,
But the public didn't go after those guys like they did OJ. And
right.
I get it how OJ, really, beat it and like kind of acted his way in all the interviews afterwards. It definitely was a very big circus with OJ that the other guys didn't have. But I mean, Robert Blake beat the case as well, even though, I mean,
but
do you know a lot about Robert Blake, by the way?
I do. I know about. I know
there really is a chance he didn't do it, so that is a weird one.
That's a
really weird one.
That's a really weird one because I remember I ate at Vitello's.
I did too.
I've eaten there a couple of times, and I remember thinking like, wow, this is right around the corner. There is where apparently he shot or may have shot. Yeah, his is a little strange. I mean, look, I think he probably did just because.
Who, Blake?
Yeah, just because he's just crazy. But at the same time, and I'm not saying she deserved it, but
I get it.
She had a lot of enemies.
Mm-hmm.
She was somebody that had done this before. She had been with other. She was sort of like a gold digger, and she had really done a number on other famous men, and so. Now, could he have hired somebody too? Yeah, I think I think in some way he's connected. I don't know if he pulled the trigger or if he had a friend do something, but that's like so Hollywood though, right? It's a part of Hollywood. It's like the William Shatner. You ever heard that story?
Oh, with his wife?
Yeah, the one that drowned. All the famous, there's infamous stories about like. That he killed her and all that shit, and I mean, the list goes on. I mean,
there's quite a few actors, from Gig Young. I mean, there's quite a few actors that murdered their wives or did the murder suicide thing, and
I mean, even the famous writer, what's his name, Norman Mailer, stabbed his wife. He didn't kill her. Yeah, Norman Mailer, like. Back in the 50s, they got. I mean, he was a bad drunk.
No way!
He stabbed her.
Maidstone Norman Mailer.
Do what?
The Maidstone.
Maidstone Norman Mailer. Yeah, he stabbed his wife in the 50s, like with a kitchen knife. She lived, and he, I mean, she stayed with him, and. But I mean, he was arrested and all this stuff, but he didn't go to trial. I mean, he didn't like serve any time or anything.
Oh my god!
And that was like
fucking crazy.
That was a thing on him for the rest of his life. Like, and he even has interviews where he was like, "Yes, we all know I stabbed my wife." I mean,
I love it.
He
deserved to get hit with a hammer then.
Oh, I know exactly. He ate it. Kind of going with what you were saying. I mean, so you got Norman Mailer who stabbed his wife, and yet he still maintained this. I mean, he got more famous after that, and he was already famous when he stabbed her, but he got more famous after that.
Wow.
And, wrote more and blah, blah, blah. And in O.J. Simpson, I mean, you can't deny it. He got more famous after he brutally murdered these two people.
Well, more notorious.
Well, notorious, yeah.
I mean, he
famous
he
and
really was
notorious
like a respected guy. I mean, he even had that domestic dispute with her, or like he got arrested.
He used to beat the shit out of her.
Yeah, I mean, the cops came that one time, but he was saying that she had, she was bringing men over to her house while they were doing coke with his kids that were there, and all kinds of craziness. Yeah,
and guess what? Like, and even this is something that I've seen in interviews with Marsha Clark and stuff. She talked about like it wasn't just once, 8 times. There were 8 separate times where he was beating on her and she called the cops.
Man.
And only of all of those, only once was he ever taken into custody, but he wasn't arrested. He was just taken downtown and questioned and everything, but he was never arrested for any of them. And the thing that even Marsha Clark said is like, look, you can say all you want about the cops and especially about Mark Furman and all that stuff. But Mark Furman knew he had gone on multiple occasions up to OJ's house. He, for or not to, or yeah, for the beatings, like he was called on to, and he just let him go. You know why? Because they liked him. All those cops, they liked OJ because he was a football player and he was a star, and they didn't want to believe it. And
It's
so, I mean,
hard. Yeah. I mean,
again, it's you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. These cops, that's why he got off, because they were all about, what they had done to Rodney King and blah blah blah. But at the same time, these cops were the ones that were sort of letting it go. They never arrested him.
yeah, there's different, I mean, it's not like Juice was living in a rough neighborhood. He was in
No,
Brentwood.
God.
Rodney King was
over
definitely not in that area.
No, he wasn't. I saw this interview once, and I cannot find it for the life of me, and it kills me because I saw it several years ago, and I've never seen it since. But it was on YouTube, and it was a radio show that it was a black radio show, sort of like a like hip hop in the morning kind of a thing, or something like that.
Okay.
And but you had the video of it, so you could kind of you could see what as they're talking on. And their guest was O.J. Simpson. Now, the reason for it, I think, was because of I think he had just gotten out of jail. I think is
Okay.
why that is why they had him on. I'm almost positive it was like, but it could have been right before. It could have been before he went to jail. I'm not exactly
Yeah, he
sure.
went to jail because the whole Vegas incident.
The whole Vegas
Yeah.
incident.
Which
So
was
either-
even kind of bullshit. They just wanted to bust
was.
him for something, which
They did.
ironically put him in jail, I do think, longer than a manslaughter charge would have gotten him if he would have gotten guilty in the
For
murders.
sure. Yeah. Like he spent hard time, and I mean it's probably where he got his cancer.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
But on this radio show, like, and this, look, it's a black woman and a black, I mean, the host or this guy and girl, they're both black. And so you don't have the racial element to it, right?
Right.
And it's sort of the end of the interview is what this clip is from. And he's just answering questions, and he's as charming as as O.J. Simpson is. And at the end of it, the woman, the female DJ says, "You know what, O.J.? I didn't want to like you when you came in. I didn't like you at all. But you know what? I like you, OJ. I like you." And he does, and he's smiling, and he's like, "Oh, thank you, baby. Thank you." And it's one of these things where she absolutely, over the course of that interview, he changed her from she did not like him. She was for sure he killed somebody, and he was a wife beater, and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, she's like, "Damn, you're charming and still good looking." You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. Obviously you got to see where everyone's coming from. The guy not only murdered his wife, and I don't know if Ron Goldman was banging her or like he really was just a waiter dropping off her sunglasses to her,
Right.
which I doubt.
I think he was banging her.
Had to have been.
Apparently she had candles lit in the house. Like that was like it was like she was. They had it like she was expecting something. But I will say that she also did have a boyfriend that was like this Italian dude or something. But I don't know if it
didn't stop her with.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
With Juice.
She was with Juice, and because when she was with Juice,
she was fucking Marcus Allen.
I was about to say she had some Mark Allen, she had some M. Allen there,
She like running backs, man.
I know she loved them running backs because they got that good stamina. So yeah, I mean, she was probably, old Ronnie Goldman was just like slinging it. He was laying the pipe. But yeah, so I mean, he goes up, but I mean, her head was nearly. Have you ever seen those pictures?
Oh, they're like devastating to see, and that's why I totally understand why everyone's like, no, he's a killer. They're hard to look at. Now, let me ask you: did you ever see that 5-part ESPN?
Yeah, I loved.
Okay,
I was obsessed.
I watched it multiple times. I was so into it. But now here's the thing to me that sums it all up.
Yeah.
I think it might have been the last episode. It was the guy who, I think it was his agent, or it was something like that. And he had the best story. He said that after the trial, they were sitting at OJ's house smoking a joint. And he said that he was like just staring at OJ, and OJ looks at him. He's like, "Do you want to ask me something?" And he goes to OJ. He's like, "Well, did you do it?" And he said OJ sat there for a moment and goes, "You know what? If she didn't answer the door with a knife, she'd still be alive." And I'm
Oh
like,
my God,
that's
that's
fucking
it.
it. And that was the thing. She probably, because there was, he probably came to the door freaking out. She came with a knife. He's raging. I mean, and if, it's nuts. And if that is what happened, I mean, he probably
And
would have
it
gotten
could,
manslaughter and gotten
yeah,
less than 16 years.
yeah. I mean, because the other thing too is like, and that's actually probably what it was. It probably, I mean, look, it
Like, he didn't go
probably
there with the intent. I
to
don't think,
kill her. I think, I mean, he had the knife on him, and he had, he had his whatever knife he used, and he had the
Well,
mask and
that's
the
what he
glove.
was saying, that she answered the door with a knife, threatening him.
So
And he
it
got
basically
it
that.
from her, and
Oh
he killed
yeah,
her with her knife.
and that's probably what it was. I mean, he probably wanted to, because the thing is, at the end of the day, he knew he had to get on that flight, and
Mhm.
and I think he was just obsessed, and he just wanted to go. He
But
wanted
didn't
to
they
go
say
see her.
on that flight he was like cracking jokes and being
Listen, even in the like even Alan Park, the limo driver, when like every trial, when you see
Yeah,
him giving
yeah.
his whatever you call it, his testimony, every time, I mean, he said the same thing. Like, he's calling, nobody's answering. Finally, Cato opens the gate. He sees this black guy, 6 foot, running into the house, and or fast, briskly walking into the house. And then suddenly OJ's answering the phone. And then OJ comes out and he's got everything packed. And but he's not worried. He's not freaking out. He's like very normal. He's laughing and giggling. And then
Mhm.
they get in the limo. And he said the only thing that OJ said during their limo drive from Brentwood to LAX is, he just said at one point, it's a little hot back here. Can you turn on the air? And that was it.
Hmm.
So he had that in him where he could just turn it off and turn it on. Like he
Yeah.
could, if he was, I guess maybe all those years of playing in the NFL, who knows? I mean, but he could hide whatever,
It could be
you know,
CTE too,
it could
I
be. It
mean,
could be. It totally could be.
yeah.
I mean, I hope they do that. I hope they don't just. I hope they like say, "Hey, let's cut up in his brain and see,
Yeah.
if
You
he
never
had it."
know. You never
Because
know.
if it came out that he had that, like, that would
Yeah.
be a whole new ball game.
That'd be
Because you would
fucking
have
nuts.
you would have so many people saying, "Well, look, now we understand why he killed." And I mean, I think there'd be a whole little shift in thinking about what he did. You know what I
Football,
mean?
the NFL would do everything they could to bury that
To
story.
bury
Trust
that
me.
story. Yes, they
They
would.
would bury that shit so fast.
And I was going to say, so there's this. So as I was looking on his IMDb, I just had to throw this out there. Did you know he's got one movie that's in post production? It's called Mayday Z, and he plays a character named Nordberg.
Oh my God. Is that real?
It's real. And I looked it up and he's really in it. It's directed by Michael Paré, starring Eric Roberts, Tara Reid, Michael Paré. So it's totally one of these movies.
No
It was
way.
originally called Zombies on a Plane, and now
Get
it's called
the fuck.
Mayday Z. And basically you're on a plane and it's overtaken by zombies. And so I've read, I mean, there's all kinds of questions like, is
No way.
OJ really going to appear in this? And he totally he's listed in the credits. Coolio's in it, and Coolio's dead too. So the Coolio's playing himself and OJ is playing Nordberg. So I guarantee you, and I've seen this, is that they've said even I'll tell you another one, even the Iron Sheik is in it. And he's dead as well. So if
What the fuck?
it is supposed to come out in 2025, everybody has said it's real. And I mean, they got poster art for it and everything. It's in post production. If he made it into if it's legit, and it looks pretty damn legit. If it
Love
is
it. Oh
legit,
my God.
then he's probably playing a zombie version of Nordberg. So think of how weird, how meta that would be. If a
Mhm.
movie comes out and it's obviously like Asylum or something, it's one of these movies. It comes out and he's already dead in real life, as well as Coolio and the Iron Sheik, but yet they're playing zombies. And it's being distributed by Shudder.
Oh no shit.
So Shudder is behind it. Distributor Shudder.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's probably going to be like a Shudder premiere. I mean, like
That movie has a curse on it.
it's got a curse, but tell me that movie is not going to be a huge hit. Of course it is. It's probably
It'll
going to
make
be
some money,
garbage.
that's for sure.
But who's not going to turn in to just see, these three dead guys that are playing zombies, and one of them being O.J. Simpson. It's just it's bizarre how, and that's
It's
why we
super
love,
weird.
that's why we love Hollywood, because of stuff like this.
Oh
Just
my
weird ass
God.
shit like this. That's like somebody actually cast him. He
Oh
said, "Hey,
yeah.
man." And that was the other thing too. I wanted to, I mean, we can go on this for hours, but like, so apparently, you know, obviously he owed, from that civil case, he owed like $30 million, and he never paid a dime back. And he was able to
That's
get away
right.
from that because he moved to Florida, which has a law in Florida where you can't have your retirement or your, whatever you call it, garnished.
Oh
So
wow.
when he
Okay.
got it, for being, he retired from the NFL, so he gets a pension. So you can't have your pension garnished, and his Hall of Fame pension is $25,000 a month.
No way.
It is. Every Hall of Famer makes $25,000 a month. So that's 300. I mean, or what is that? 250. So that's $300,000 a year just because they're Hall of Famers, and the NFL Hall of Famers. And that's legit. That is 100% true. And so that's why he moved to Florida, because they can't, he's living the high life, $300,000 a year. They can't touch it, so he doesn't have to pay them shit. The only
Yeah.
problem is that if anything he did, like when he wrote that book, If I Did It, which I read and it was awesome.
Oh, did you? Oh.
Yeah, that was like the documentary. I couldn't put it down.
I can't
could
believe
not-
you wrote that.
I couldn't put it down. And and of course I don't know if you ever heard about it, but he talks about, like, in it, when he's describing the night, he describes it as him and this guy named Charlie. There's this mysterious guy named Charlie. And when he says the moment happened, basically he says that he blacks out. And then when he comes to, he's covered in blood. There's two dead bodies, and Charlie is screaming at him saying, OJ, what'd you do? What'd you do?
Oh my God.
Like, that's the book. That's what he says.
That's so fucking gnarly. Jesus.
I mean, and let me give these last two things, because I know I'm just blowing up, but I love this shit, obviously.
Yeah,
so I'll
it's
say these
funny.
two. Okay. So as far as the book goes, and I found this out today, and this blew my mind. So when he wrote that book, If I Did It, he had a ghostwriter. So like that was, like in a ghostwriter. I mean, I didn't really know what that was, but now I know is like basically somebody that you just dictate everything and they put it in form for you, essentially. Well, the guy who ghost wrote this book is a professional ghostwriter, and he's a writer, but he does a lot of ghostwriting and stuff. His name escapes me, but he was one of the witnesses during the trial. He was the guy who was the neighbor of Nicole who heard the dog barking.
Holy shit.
So he gave the time frame. That was when they knew, like when the dog was barking, that was basically the beginnings of the kill. That was like when the murder happened. And he was like legit. I've seen his testimony. He was he testified all throughout the trial. It ended up years later, because he worked for like HarperCollins or something as a ghostwriter. That was what he did.
Cool.
Well, it just so happens that when OJ approached HarperCollins or whoever about writing the thing, he needed a ghostwriter. They hired him. And he said that when he showed up in Miami, because he was, OJ was already living in Miami.
Okay.
He showed up to his house in Miami, and they walk inside, and the first thing, OJ extends his hand, and they shake his hand, and the first thing that OJ says is something to the effect of, I'm going to ruin it, so I don't even want to say it, but essentially there was a piece of evidence, or during his testimony, the ghostwriter guy says something about the dog, about how the dog was something about the dog. And OJ refers to that when he is introduced as like, hey, how could a dog like that be blah, 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 letting him know, like, I remember you from the trial. like kind of, but they got along. And he said that there was never a moment that was weird except one moment. And he said that they were in a hotel room one night in Miami, and they get to the chapter where it's the murder, right? And the whole time OJ doesn't want to talk about it. He's like really antsy. He doesn't want to talk about it. He's like, why do we have to keep doing this chapter? And, I don't want to do it. And he's like, OJ, this is the only reason that people are going to buy this book is for this chapter. We have to write about it.
Right.
And finally, he said that OJ looked at him and said, let me ask you something. Do you think I did it? He says that he looked at OJ and he said, OJ, 30 years ago, I thought you did it. And right now, I still think you did it. And he says OJ flipped out, started cussing, screaming at him, finally calmed down and started laughing and said, and sat down and said, you know what? I like you because you're truthful. Just, stuff like that. And I'm going to say this one last thing.
I know.
I got to say this last thing. This one I found out, I heard today, and it blew my mind as well. Bob Costas, who we all know.
Yeah.
The sports guy and all that. Well, all those guys were friends with OJ. They were all, because he was doing like you were saying, he was doing the Monday Night Football and all that. So they all knew him. So when all this shit goes down, they're all like trying to make sense of it. Well, OJ asked to speak to Bob Costas when he was arrested. So Bob Costas went and saw him in jail one day. And I've never been to a jail. I've never seen anybody in jail. But apparently when you're in jail, to shake hands, you have to put your hand like on the glass.
Okay.
It's like you see it in movies where one guy, the prisoner puts his hand on the glass, and then the person on the other side puts his hand, like they touch hands through the glass. So they start off like that was the first thing. So OJ puts his hand on the glass, and Bob Costas puts his hand on the glass to touch OJ's. It just so happened that the night before, Bob had cut his finger and had put a Band-Aid on it. So he had a Band-Aid on his finger. And as soon as OJ saw it, he said, so you did it. and Bob says he had never told that story before. A couple of people, but he said now he might as well tell. But that's the balls that OJ had. Even when he's in prison.
There's gotta, he either is like 100% innocent and he could say this shit.
He could do that shit.
Right. Or there is some real mental problems going on, not just a crazy guy, because there's psychopaths, right? I get it. But there's something about how you said you can just turn it off and on. That's like those CTE guys. It's just like you have you go insane. And I don't know. There's something up with him,
because all those guys. There was the guy who a lot of them killed themselves. Yeah, and they didn't just kill themselves. Some of them, like Junior Seau, drove off a cliff.
No, remember he shot himself in the chest.
No, that's what he did. But there was another one. Yeah, he shot himself, and then there was another one that drove up. And then, but then you had the guys who there was one that.
Well, Mike Webster from the Steelers is who it started with. That was the Will Smith movie.
That was he was like the first one that they think was
There were a couple Steelers that had it, and there was a football player who there was one of our guys as well our guys, I guess, my team, but there was one of the guys who played for the Steelers that he got into a high-speed chase with the cops, and his car blew up on the side of the road. Justin Straussnick was his name.
Yeah, so it's not just it's like, oh, I'm going to hang myself in my closet. It's like intense.
No, they go all guns
crazy.
Blazing.
Yeah, guns blazing. There was the one guy who was in the back of a pickup truck, and he was acting all crazy, and he fell out, and he just cracked his head open.
Ugh.
There's been some really, even beyond football. Chris Benoit.
Yeah,
the wrestler who
good point.
He murdered his wife, his son, then himself. Ugh. And when they tested his brain, they said he had the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. That's how, all these constant repeated hits. It just changes people. Look, we could say what we want. We could. it could just be that he was psycho. It could just be that he got away with it. He was happy as hell. I mean, listen, when you watch that not guilty verdict, and you
Yeah.
see his face, he's
Oh my
just
God.
like,
Yeah.
oh, and you got Johnny Cocker behind him. He's like, yes, yes, you're going home, Juice.
Yeah.
Like he was so relieved. So can you imagine that? Like,
Oh, I mean, I think of that
the relief
the show too, the People versus OJ. Like, what was it, who plays him again? Cuba Gooding Jr.
Cooper,
Yeah, yeah. I think of that show because they try to show a little, even though it's fake, but they try to show some behind the scenes of like how his life was in prison, and he was like, he's like, I haven't taken a shower in a year, and just think about how grimy and dirty you are because you got to take those quick hose downs, and oh God.
And he's just a big old, running back. I mean, he's just a beefy dude that's like, and he's, constantly sweating. He's in prison.
And I can't remember the name of the convention he was at when we were there. It was him and AC. But for the most part, people were being nice. There were a lot of football fans getting memorabilia signed. But I was like, oh, we got to go up there right now, So it was like we went up there, and I have to say, it definitely felt like, like this motherfucker is, could fuck you up. He seemed like a killer a little bit. I was like, but it was like fresh off the, everything. And it was right before he went to prison for the Vegas.
Oh, okay. So it was like, so he was still.
Because remember when he got not guilty, he got out. Like the public obviously, he was shamed. So, but even worse than Robert Blake, he was shamed so hard. He literally became what he never was, but he was like this, bad guy in the media, getting in trouble, doing things, he and start partying in public. And like he had this really great image, and it's just like he was just forced out of it. I don't know. But he was really dark for a lot of years before he went to prison. Yeah. When he got out of prison, he seemed like at the end, like you said, he was all bubbly OJ again. But that little stint there, he was like getting like, it was pretty crazy.
And he was because I remember he was doing weird videos. He just had chicks all the time. Just had, and they were all blonde chicks. They're all blonde chicks,
right.
Like
I was waiting for him to do porn.
I know, I was too. I was too, because I was like, oh, he's living it up.
Yeah,
he
is going to do every bad thing possible now,
And I'll tell you something, kind of just to sort of go back just from the very beginning. It's weird to think how each of us who are born in different generations, we have these generational moments. We have, obviously 9/11 was something for people. And I remember hearing something about, somebody was saying earlier, like the Challenger. And I was like, the Challenger, there are certain things, Princess Diana dying, things like that. This is one of those moments, and it's certainly, it might even be the biggest, but this and 9/11, to me, I think the two biggest
pop culture wise, will never get anything bigger than this.
It changed everything.
Yeah. That's just before this, it was like, John Lennon being shot. They stopped Monday Night Football. They didn't stop Monday Night Football. They announced it during Monday Night Football. Howard Cosell was like, John Lennon got shot, But like you said, though, they split screened the basketball game, right?
They split screened the finals of the NBA with the Knicks.
Damn.
The Knicks, who had not won in 20 some odd years, who had constantly been, and they're a big market team.
I know, it's crazy.
And they split screen. To the point where it wasn't just split screen all the time. There were sometimes a lot of it. It was a small screen, and they had the big. They had the Bronco chase, and then in the corner, the small box was the basketball game. That's how much it dwarfed it.
If I was a Knicks fan, I'd been fucking pissed off.
I'd been pissed, like, OJ, you fuck.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think, because when things like this happen, I don't care who you are. There is if you are of this generation, there is a mourning. Not a mourning necessarily of like, him but of like that time period, because this totally is it. Like
absolutely. Everything, Naked Gun, football, all of the commercials, everything.
that it's now officially over. I mean, in a couple of months we'll have the 30th, and people I'm sure will talk about it. But now it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's sort of like it's now officially in the ether. Like it's like Jonestown, right?
Yeah.
It's like that happened. That was this crazy thing that happened, and but he died with it. So it's people still remember it. I mean, they still have these little things, but it doesn't have the same effect.
Right.
And this is kind of like, oh wow, this is, I'm 43, right? And I'm thinking, man, that's 30 years. 30
Yeah.
years since this first took place. Like where is my life? How has it changed? How has the world changed with this?
30 years, man.
I mean, people watch, like now this was the beginning of TV. Everything you got to, the blood and guts. Let's see the tragedies unfold before our eyes. Reality TV at its finest.
Oh yeah, this is before all that.
Celebrity. Like now, how you got. I mean, we looked at celebrity differently after this. It's just it's kind of wild. It's wild.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, man. I mean, it's very easy to say good riddance, killer, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I get it. I mean, absolutely.
For
I mean,
sure.
obviously, as soon as I got older, I realized, yeah, he obviously did it.
He cut her head off nearly.
Unless you buy into the sun theory. Have you ever
Oh my
heard
God,
that?
I have. That is and I'll tell you something. I mean, I didn't want to even get into it, but when I started reading a little bit on this theory, I was like, oh Jesus.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's on paper it makes sense,
It makes
obviously,
sense.
yeah.
He's not gifted, but he's touched, right? He's sort of unhinged emotionally.
But he carries those knives on him. He
Carries
is
his
the
knives.
one in the video when the Bronco pulls up, he goes yelling into it.
Yeah.
Remember that when you see the video, the kid running up, that is his son. They were supposed to have the dinner that night, and Nicole stood them up, and he had a history of violence and raging. I mean, yeah, it's crazy to think it. I mean, but you know what I was saying? I was like, if that was the truth, OJ's like father of the year. Like he
Yeah.
of the century. He's father of the century if his son did it.
Exactly. If his son had the only thing that would, for me, the biggest thing I think is that Bronco chase. It's that
iconic, man.
He wrote this suicide note. He had a gun to his head. It's like if he was going to kill himself. I mean, because he was, he knew he had ruined his life. The thing is, if his son had done it, he would just, I mean, the only thing I could say is that if his son did it, then OJ Simpson is one of the most sly, intelligent bastards and father of the years, because he would have had to understand, like, okay, this is what I got to do. I got to write this note,
right?
And then I've got to put he had a disguise mustache goatee thing. I have to get one of those. I have to get all this money. I have to like get a gun, and I have to go to Mexico. I have to create this whole scenario in a very short amount of time to take the heat off my son, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that just, with everything, but maybe, I mean, maybe,
But, now that he's dead, and even Rug Goldman's dad was like, OJ dying, all that does is remind me of my son, remind me of what happened to him. So it doesn't bring anyone back. So that's why I didn't understand why everyone was like, good, but
yeah,
I'm thinking of not just the football player, but, like you said, we're a movie show. And
we're a movie show.
He's got some great ones, Forever Nordberg, but,
Forever Nordberg.
He was an actor. OJ Simpson was an actor for a little time. That's what we're going to talk about.
And the funny thing is, to me, he was always more of an actor than I didn't know him. I wasn't alive in the 70s, so I didn't see him play. And even though I know his accomplishments on the field, like to me, it was like you said, the Naked Gun movies, Towering Inferno, The Klansman. Apparently, this new Mayday Z movie where he's reprising the Nordberg character. God, I hope he does. If he's a zombie Nordberg and he pulls out some vintage 1988 falling around, like if he's the zombie that's just goofy, he's like just like bouncing, banging into things, like, oh no, then I'm just sold.
If you start a conversation about O.J. Simpson and you begin by talking about what a great tailback he was, initially people are confused and then they get mad. I mean, it's just so weird now because even talking about him as a football player, it seems like you're missing, like we're overlooking the obvious. OJ's football legacy is destroyed. People will never remember or think about what a great running back he was because of the last half of his life, and there's no way around it. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. In his obituary, football player now is mentioned in the first paragraph, but they don't talk about USC or the Bills until paragraph 5. I think people have completely overlooked the fact now that he was clearly the best running back of the 70s. So if you sort of realize that he's the best running back at a time when the most important part of the offensive game is running the football, I think you could easily argue that O.J. Simpson is the most valuable player of the 70s for the entire league. Every time he ran the ball, it was almost like the Bills' equivalent of throwing the ball deep. It might not work, but if you made a mistake, they would score. I've seen footage of O.J. Simpson running the football dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and I can't, for the life of me, even remember the number of the guy handing him the ball. He had no element of surprise. He had no passing game to sort of change the way defensive played him, and he was incredibly effective. He was not going to play in a Super Bowl. There was no shot. So he has this game on Thanksgiving where he rushes for 273 yards, proof that the best football player in the world is just sort of being wasted on this team going no place.
On Thanksgiving 1976, Buffalo's quarterback completed 4 of 21 passes for 29 yards. O.J. Simpson ran 29 times for a then single-game record 273 yards in defeat.